Hello, I'm Donald J. Pliner, and it's a privilege to be here at Wynwood Lab here in Wynwood, in Florida. And I think that, first of all, just so you know, that I started my first business in Beverly Hills in 1967. And originally I was in clothing and in shoes eventually. But I think what's really important is that in my life, I've lost 3 times to the bare bone, and it wasn't only until about a year ago that I started writing a book to find out who Donald Pliner was, or Donald Pliner as a company. And what I realized that the book that I'm writing, the name of the book has been called Passion. And if you really have a passion for what you're doing, it's not work, but it's a profession that's enjoyable. And I've had, as I said, a lot of ups and downs, and behind me are some of the formats, but I started off basically, as I said, in retail in 1967, and there were several things. I also had a couple stores in Beverly Hills, 2 on Rodeo, where I had most expensive men's and women's shoes and clothing. 65% of my business was the entertainment industry. Like Jack Nicholson and Warren Beatty used to hang out the women's shop to try to pick up chicks all the time. Tina Turner sometimes would start singing. Elton John in the 70s used to spend $30,000 a month just on sunglasses and furs as gifts for people. I can tell you story after story. We did all the wardrobe, like for Charlie's Angels, Barbra Streisand. I mean, it didn't matter. We had an expensive, very expensive English tea room architecturally, and especially since we're in furniture. In the 70s, I built a store that was built like this, and like this. That was pure, all glass. It was glass atrium. And I was known for one of my dressing rooms I used to have in all my stores that was octagonal in shape. There was wall, floor, and ceiling totally mirror. It was like total infinity when you walked into. Even my floors and the actual windows, you can reverse them, so you could have wood on one side or mirror on the other, and it picked up all the elements of the store. And everything I did, always, particularly in furniture, even in clothing or shoes, had a complete element. I think probably the most important course, I went to college for 5.5 years to avoid the Vietnam War. And I took art history and painting because I thought that was the easiest, and I thought probably the most important thing that I learned from that was a course called Anatomy and Portraiture, in the sense that when you do like a portrait, it could be like a Degas with the ballet dancers, the orchestra, the audience pit, that your eye has to continuously flow. And the anatomy, Picasso could probably put the left arm on the right side. But so everything that I did in furniture, I did in clothing, always was pure a portrait and anatomy. And I think one of the things today, for example, people design shoes. Sometimes they design the shoes from the shoes to the ankle, and they forget what goes above it. Sometimes people, when you're doing your furniture, maybe they think about one piece, and that what's important that furniture, artifacts, whatever it is, your eye should always flow, so it should start from the bottom and go up and down. And sometimes when you're doing furniture designs, I notice sometimes you go in a room and you see one thing but you don't see the other things because there isn't a flow. So again, the name portraiture and anatomy is so very important. And what I learned was when I started designing shoes, particularly, I always had a theme and something that was part of what I was doing. And there was a word, sometimes the word assume, probably, which is the worst word in the English dictionary. And I know my daughter one time told to me, who's 11, she said, she was describing something, and I said, how do you spell that? She says, I said, are you sure that's right? She says, yes, my best girlfriend told me. So I told her to go Google the word, and it was wrong. So I said to her, Star, her name is Star, double R, I want you to take a piece of paper. And she was taking a little scratch paper. I said, no, take a big piece of paper, and I want you to write these words very carefully, these letters. I said, start A, S, S, dash, U, dash, me. And I said, you know what that means? And I think it's probably the worst word we have in the English dictionary. And I said, Star, next time when someone tells you something, to make sure. And what I'm really bringing up is the word assume. It doesn't matter. I think it's probably the worst word in the English dictionary. I know working in Europe and Italy and Spain, it was the hardest thing I had to do to work with my factories. And I think when we work with people, sometimes we assume. And I know in furniture, which is a very interesting thing, I've been doing furniture, particularly in my stores, and working with color, but working with a lot of antlers. And I was home in LA the other day over Thanksgiving, and it was interesting. One of my best friends, who's known me since '67, been into my stores, he's been into my home, he's been to everywhere where I've had antlers. All this time he thought that antlers were either wood or resin, and it made me aware about assuming. And my new gallery, which is predicated and based off of color, based off of antlers, most people have no idea. Most people think that you kill the animal. And I had to explain to them that how animals with the horns, basically they get right before sex, they start fighting and getting position, who they're going to have sex with. During the sex, they actually shed their antlers. And that's where the antlers come from. But it's amazing what we know, but you're talking to a client and you're talking to someone and you assume that they understand these things. You assume about the furniture, you assume about so many things, and I think it's the word dictionary. The other word that I learned very quickly, not quick enough, is the word kiss. And if you don't know what that means, you say it to yourself, keep it simple, stupid. And one of the things right behind me, if I could show walking away from the camera, when I used to design my shoes, this is an example in '92, there would be a picture of the shoe, and then on the left, actually, there would be a couple of the other shoes, and you read down, there might be 15 combinations, and I have to those were the days, so everything was handwritten. And obviously to the factory, I actually drove them totally insane. To the customer, they had no idea that I really should kiss. And instead of them having 12 combinations, I should have had 3 combinations. The time I would have saved would have been phenomenal. But this is how I used to do everything. And I took a business also in a whole different sense, where I lost 3 times in my life everything to the bare bone, and I didn't know until about a year ago who Donald Pliner was, even from a company or the name. And I started a business in 1989. I was living here in Miami. Sold my first condo in Williams Island, a 3,000-foot condo, moved into a 150-foot studio in New York, took a job on the side working for Perry Ellis so I could hire a girl 1 day a week. I was paying, my brother told me when I was out there, go get some credit cards. I went out and got 20 bank cards, and for 5 years I was paying $20,000 to $25,000 a year in finance charges. I was about $495,000 in the hole. And thank God Nordstrom's came up to me and offered me a free ad in Vogue, and I said to myself, if I can make these shoes on time, that was my turning point. I took my company on my own from 0 to 100 million. And I had people, and I've had even people now that are working for me, and it was all about passion. It was all about really feeling. We lost our first child, and we ended up adopting a little girl in Kazakhstan. During the 8 years we were doing that, I got a little dog for my wife called Baby Doll, and she's been in all our magazines and everything. So when my daughter was barely 11 months old, we took her over here to the Children's Museum. She was barely walking, and she came back walking because children learn from one another. Her best girlfriend was black, and no one told her because prejudice comes in. So we started a foundation called Peace for the Children. And sorry to walk away from the camera. And everything I do, for example, so we've actually built a park at the Children's Museum. We built a park in Houston, for example, where there are 300 families at an average income of $12,000. And we're involved with Kaboom. This happens to be a current t-shirt, and it's actually my daughter, it's her hands on there, and it shows a man and a woman. You'll see every t-shirt has a mission, our peace mission. And but everything I did my leatherware, and you would see sometimes on the leather it would say day, night. 2006 was the year we bought her to, when we bought her here. All of my shoes, everything just like this here. There was a meaning behind everything I did in my life. I'm gonna pass this book around, and we did a lot of things in India, and I'll pass it here to Michael here. And one of the things, if you could see, I'll lift my foot. I did these beaded shoes, and it came about with there's a gentleman who found me on the internet. He sent me all this information, and I said to him, this isn't what I want. His name is Darjani Jada. Now it's DJ, and I'm DJP. And I sent him a picture of our carpet. And if you see our carpets in our gallery, that's how I started, from the beaded. And the beaded shoes that I'm wearing, for example, the pattern's made in Italy. Then it goes over to India. The beads come from the Czech Republic. Each is made one by one, 30 to 38 hours per pair. I'm not sure if you can see this, but this gives you an example. These were shoes I only wish I had taken. This approximately is one by one. Every bead is triple knotted. It's actually about 30 some hours to make a pair of these. And we're gonna have, even the shoe I'm wearing, they'll all be beaded. I started off with a lot of cowhide, and if you look at our new building, you'll see I sold my company about 4.5 years ago to a hedge fund. And like hedge funds, sometimes they promise you one thing and obviously they don't give it to you. So I recently resigned, and I resigned about 7 months early to expedite my non-compete. But I also, when I resigned, I gave up 25 years and 6 retail stores. So the front of our building is cows, which was a whole story about how I was living with a redheaded lady, and she was from Australia, and if I didn't marry her, she would have to go back to Australia. So I started manufacturing in 10 different countries of clothing. And when I finally got to Australia, I realized I didn't like her. So I bought myself an Irish setter and solved my redhead frustration. And I called her Baby Doll. It was a whole nother story. And she was on the first front cover show Teeks ever did. It was a baby doll sweater that was made in Ireland. So I used to do a lot of shoes in cowhide, like little boots and things like this. So it all coincides. One of the things that I do, a lot of people always knew me for, was my comfort. And because I travel so much, and I'm totally aware of the fact what happens when I exercise every day and run, what it's like to exercise without sneakers or walk. And I'm on the plane, and how I got into stretch was, I'm sure you've been on a plane and someone takes off their shoes and you wish they wouldn't. So I figured, how do I make shoes that you don't have to? And everything I was doing was always stretch. There are various things I can show you, our magazine ads, but the most important thing that I think that from furniture, it doesn't really matter what it is first to have a passion for what you're doing, to really understand it, to understand really what a portraiture is and what anatomy is that the eye always follows. Never assume because there's things that you know that other people you think they would know, they don't. And if you have an opportunity to come over to my gallery, you'll understand I used to design furniture, clothes, shoes, anything, but I always start with color and material, and I had no idea I never realized that basic up until just recently, until I opened this gallery, that I was really an artist more than I was a designer. And when we lived in a place called Star Island, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, in South Beach, and we had probably the most magnificent Moroccan blue palace. And we had this one room that was about 20 some feet high. And I had this painting that I got from Santa Fe, and it was cobalt blue, and it had figures on it, and wherever you walked, they would walk with you. And I wanted a Chihuly. If you're familiar with Chihuly, that's the ones that make the hand-blown glass figures and the chandeliers, and I knew it was too expensive, so I was working with all the antlers. So I called the guy in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I said, smoke a little dope, I need something 4 feet by 6 feet. Bought the chandelier back, took it to a car dealership and sprayed it cobalt blue lacquer car, and not realizing, so when you come into my gallery, because when I sold the company, everything that I did, the whole heritage, all the furniture, they completely took it away. Also, the business went from 100 to 57. They dropped another 25 in. I'm only hoping it's going to be successful because I still own stock in the company. So I was literally taking all of the furniture I designed, the antlers, and you have to come in and you see if the antler is China red. All the masks I collected from the world, I used to collect these pigs from Santa Fe, New Mexico, various artifacts, so everything, if it's China red, half of it, the antler is China red, the pigs, the artifacts, the mask, half would be painted China red, and everything was lacquer. It's a 5-color zone, and it's really quite impressive because no one's ever done furniture and art in a lacquer format, and I had no idea what I was really doing. The carpets, you'll see some of my carpets at over 15 years of age, and you would think they're brand new. It's really about looking at everything from a portrait, looking at everything as what you would understand and making sure other people understand it. One of the things when we did adopt our little girl, and I told you we took her over to the Children's Museum and she came back walking, we started our own foundation called Peace for the Children, and that's where we build parks. If you notice, I have a lot of skulls. I do it in my shoes, even the shoe here. And actually, if you look carefully, it says 1989. That was the year that I started. And the reason I do skulls in my shoes, I wear skulls, is because when children learn to communicate, there'll be peace. Until then, there's war, and I don't do it for music. I do it for communication, for peace. And everything and the most important thing was the word communication, because that's probably our biggest problem that we have in what we do. We're too much on texting, we're too much doing everything but talking. And I remember one time there was Steve Martin, the comedian, said he was calling someone and he was so upset because they answered the phone because all he wanted to do was leave a message. And it happens all the time. I mean, I get so upset with my wife. She's constantly texting. I said, just get on the phone and say hello, talk to the people. My own people that are working for me, they are, I see them like just get on the phone and just talk. And even my daughter, it's like, learn how to write. I think probably one of the things I learned about myself was when we were younger, our parents probably tried to teach us a lot of things and we didn't want to pay attention to them. And today, now, a lot of the things that my father and mother taught me, I try to teach into my child. But I don't think, if you go in, again, I'm not trying to be redundant, if you go in the gallery, there's nothing in there that I had not touched in the last 53 years that I've been in business. And it's all out there. You walk in and it's a flow. Even the smell, because I used to do all this potpourri and special senses. So when you walk in, everything about it, and what I'm talking about, this is furniture. Everything you do should not just be a chair. There has to be a reason why you're doing the chair, why you're doing the color, why the flowers are this color or that color. And sometimes we're not paying attention to what it's about. And as I said, I only wish that I knew what the KISS method was. I only wish that I had any idea who Donald Pliner was as a company, because maybe I brought the company up to 100. Probably if I really knew who I was, I probably would have brought it up to $1 billion. And really what's interesting, there's a magazine called Forbes, which is a business magazine. And years ago, it was all about the millionaires, the millionaires, the millionaires. Today, it's about the billionaires. And it talks about billionaires in the entire world. And there's a billionaire in every little country or big country, and surprisingly they had it by their net worth. And if I had asked everybody, we would have assumed one country, Russia, China, United States, is number one at 740 trillion. Number two is Israel, that had like 275, probably the smallest population, but it was about technology. Then followed China and Russia. And you go around, but more important, it's about the young entrepreneurs today, the 20 years, the 25-year-olds, the 30, the 35, and this is where probably the biggest growth is, and this is how we have to relate to their technology and who their eye is and what they've seen and what they haven't seen. And I know I do these what's called personal appearances around the country, and people are taking pictures, and particularly young kids are taking pictures of me. But they have no idea. They must have been there with their mother or their grandmother. They just wanted to be part of it, because prior to when I sold the business, prior to that, I used to do anywhere from 4 to 6 magazines twice a year, from 4 to 12 pages, from Harper's Bazaar to Vogue to InStyle, Men's Health, GQ. Today, this company has not done a single national ad. My advertising was so ahead. And you got to communicate, and they're missing that whole point, and that's why I'm saying, so I take these pictures with these young kids, they have no idea who Donald Pliner is. They're only there because their mother. And I'm going to repeat, and just to finish, don't assume, use the KISS method, think about anatomy, think about portraiture, and everything has to flow, and every piece of furniture that you do, make sure there's a meaning. I remember I did a lot of, for FIT, I did various meetings with them, or seminars, and sometimes they have to have a presentation for me. and they would show me this fabulous designs they had, and I said to them, but how are you going to make it? And I said, well, how do you connect these things? And that's my wife calling. She likes to call both numbers just to make sure. And my wife also is very much involved in the gallery. She was an artist. She went to Siena. She went to school in Siena. She went to school in Paris, and you're seeing the various things that she does. And I think it's always good to have another person, because you don't agree, but you do agree and you learn from that. But the most important thing is listening. I was just walking over here, and one of the gentlemen must have repeated 3 times what I asked him. I said, you told me, don't say it again. And the other gentleman said, at least he's communicating. But the problem is he wasn't communicating because he wasn't listening. Sometimes we talk and we hear people talk, but they don't know, they're not really paying attention to what they're even saying. So life is fabulous. And always remember that today you woke up, that other people didn't wake up. We're involved with a lot of charities. We just did a thing with Make-A-Wish. We do a thing with our own foundation. It's fabulous to be around, but it's fabulous to take advantage. Time is our most precious commodity we have. If I had asked you what time it was 20 minutes ago, you would have told me that, but I would say to you, what time is it now? And then people said, but you just asked me. 20 minutes went by. You'll never get those 20 minutes back. There is no dress rehearsals in life. So just don't abuse time. And if there's any questions, I'll be glad to ask. Otherwise, it is a privilege here to be in such a fabulous location and to see so much interest and see just what's going on here in Wynwood. Because honestly, the 30 years that I lived in Miami, I must have been at Midtown once or twice for a restaurant. I had no idea what's going on and what's particularly going on. If you've never been to New York, this is really the Soho. When you think of Lincoln Road, you think of South Beach, where you see all these crazy little tourists walking around in high heels or bathing suits, and all of a sudden here, this is art.